I am so excited for you to meet Eleanor today. Our conversation is one that I really think any woman that has big dreams, has plans of success, desires, goals, etc., really needs to take heart and listen to this. Hey everyone, welcome back to Work Life Harmony. I'm fangirling a little bit this morning with our guest, Eleanor. We were just reflecting before we started on how our paths have sort of been crossing, but not really for a long time. And then now here we are, and the internet and the world is a fascinating thing. So, Eleanor, welcome to the show. Before we kind of dive into our conversation, I would love for you to share with our listeners all about what you do both personally, what does your life look like personally, and then who you serve as the head of Safi Media, because I learn from you all the time.
Thank you so much for that and for this opportunity. So, I am Eleanor. I'm a wife of 22 years to Leon, to my husband Leon, and going strong. I'm a mom to
Love it.
two boys, Noah and Tobias, and so they are one just graduated high school. He is a high performance athlete, potentially on his way to represent Canada, which is very exciting. We have our younger son is just starting out high school. He's a musician and a football player. So I am extremely busy, like at this stage of life, really being present and trying to have as much time and space as possible for my kids to be present to them and their needs. And professionally, I am the CEO of Safi Media. We are a training and education company, and we have this little mission, this little vision
Just
to
tiny mission.
double, just tiny, to double the number of women entrepreneurs who sustainably scale past 1 million by 2030.
Say
And
that
it's so
again, because
important
that's
for
a
us,
really
yeah,
cool mission.
to double the number of women entrepreneurs who sustainably scale past 1 million in annual revenue by 2030. And
See,
the
and the
reason that
word
this
that
is
you
so
say
important,
sustainably is why I
sustainably,
love that.
yes.
It's so
Because I
different
think,
than hustle, grind, go, 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 and
right?
collapse, right?
I mean, I think that's why I'm so drawn to your work, because I think that for a long time, I thought if I was going to have all the time that I wanna have to take care of myself, to fit in all the things, that I would really have to sacrifice my ambition and sacrifice my financial goals. And I think there's a new generation of women business owners who are starting to really model to each other, and co-create a way of creating personal and professional success that nurture each other. So, yeah, that's why I think we're drawn to each other's work, because it feels like it's a different sides of the same coin.
Yeah, and the same underlying, really core principles of what our life deserves to look and feel like with whatever our definition of
Ye
success is, right? And I love that, you're kind of sharing as your kids are a little on the older side. I think there's a misbelief. I know I had it when my daughter was a toddler, thinking like, oh, this is the crazy time, right? It will get easier. I'll have more free time when they get older. The fact is, it just shifts, right? It was very physical for so long. Now it's the time, it's the space, it's the events, it's the conversations, it's the, if there's a free weekend, wanting to figure out what can we do as a family to enjoy that time together, because I see it's gonna be over soon. So it's the same demands on your time. It's just the how it's being filled. It's,
Yeah.
really
Totally.
changes.
Yeah, like, I remember when they were little, I mean, there's an aspect to parenting very small kids, and I say this with just a huge amount of love to our small kids, but it's tedious. First, you have to help them wash their hands, and then you have to put them in the high chair, and then you have to make sure it's just like step after step after step, and then that goes away, but what you get is this real need for presence. There's, like, this observation to I just have boys, but they get quieter. So you have to pay more attention to what's going on in their lives, and
Mhm.
how might I be able to be present to that? And I've certainly noticed I've needed more white space to be a good mom, the kind of mom that I wanna be to them as they've gotten older.
That's fascinating. And, so my daughter is the same age as your youngest. She's, into high school now. And I remember leading up to this stage of life, all the social media stuff out there about the like the kind of the negative teenage girls, right? Like the, oh, it's going to be doom and gloom and this and that. And like, I'm loving this stage. Our conversations are fascinating. How we spend time looks very different, but I don't think I could be enjoying it if I had constant stress and anxiety and feeling pulled between work and home and work and home. I don't think, because to your point, it requires a lot of active listening, I
Yeah.
think, on my end to kind of feel what's going on to then know where we're navigating this
Yeah.
conversation or this drive home or that kind of thing, that I don't think I'd have that or be enjoying it if there was all the added demands of hustle and grind on top of it.
Well, this is a larger conversation, but one of the things that I've been really waking up to is the degree to which I misunderstood just how much better your life gets. So I remember as a young woman in my 20s, I was like, "Oh, this must be I am in my prime." What? I thought I was
Me
and then in
too.
my 30s, right? Again, I thought I was in my prime. And now I'm like, "Oh, sister girl, you didn't even know,"? So it's like, as you start to get older, when you as you the tools are in front of us, and we'll talk about that, but the tools are in front of us, and as we start to use them, when we combine the right tools to be able to give ourselves the space to actually enjoy what we've created as women, for me, I'm 46, for women in our 40s, I think it's like
And 50s.
you right, and 40s and 50s, right? It's like you just are at this different phase of your life
Mhm.
where things get way better,
Yeah.
and to have the time and space to be able to enjoy the life you've created, it's incredibly meaningful. It's a very rich time of life I'm experiencing.
Oh, I agree with that 100%. And so this is probably not what our listeners are expecting to hear, because it certainly shocked me when I discovered that Eleanor had enrolled in my top program. Because as a fellow business owner who learns from you on the regular and, outside looking in, I'm like, this is a woman that has figured out how she is creating harmony in her life with running this incredibly successful business. They're in the moment with all of her kids. And so to see that you had become a student in the top program, I had that kind of gulp moment like, okay, Megan, will I hear feedback from her? So I'm curious to know initially, even what was it that prompted you to join the program as someone that, you figured your time out quite a bit.
Yeah, 100%. So in full transparency, I was, and I'll explain this term in a second, I was funnel hacking. So I was funnel hacking Megan. I had heard Megan on Ellen Yin's podcast, Cubicle to CEO. And I really respect Ellen. I love that show. And Megan was talking about her Pink Bee app. So you're talking about your Pink Bee app. I was like, oh, this is fascinating. And so I went and I downloaded the app. And I wasn't thinking that I necessarily needed support with time management. But I was, as I started, taking some
Just
of the
marketing
free course.
lenses
Yeah,
on,
I
like,
was
how is
using
she
my
using
marketing
this?
lens.
Yeah.
I was like, she's very smart. Like I just heard the smarts, and I was very drawn to that. I was like, okay, I'm going to check this out because I actually don't funnel hack a lot. I'm like, I don't care. So funnel hacking is when you go and you check out someone's marketing to see what they're doing.
Yeah.
So I go and I sign up for the Pink Bee app and I start doing some of the free tools. There was like the one notebook challenge I think was on there
Yeah.
and a
Oh,
few
yeah.
things like that, right?
Yep.
And I was like, "Oh, make your morning routine." I think that may have been another one. I
That was
can't
in there for a while. Yep.
Yeah, it was so this was in May, like late April, May of this year, and I found it very valuable. So I was like, "I'm totally gonna do this time management course and the top program and time management organization productivity." And I was really enjoying it. You see, because the place that I was at in my business, and I'm still here, and I think this is an ongoing process, which is where you realize as a leader that the number one bottleneck to your growth is no longer simply systems. It's not like I have the team, I have the systems, I know what my market position is, my offer sell, but I have this big vision, and it's I want to be at the UN. I want to be, you know, doing deals with Melinda Gates and Pivotal Ventures to get our entrepreneurial education programming out into the hands of women entrepreneurs globally to help them make a difference. Like it's a really big vision. And to do that, I need to fire myself from things that I'm doing in my business. I have to let go, like women grow by letting go. So my challenge was that my skill set was being able to see the vision and understand the big chess pieces I need to move to get there, and the self-awareness to see, well, as a certain amount of self-awareness to see where I'm in my own way. I definitely trust others to tell me, you know? But there was this next level, which is what is the bridge between what my day-to-day activities are and how I actually start to make room to move these big puzzle pieces. And I'll be honest, I had not found a really effective time management, like time, how I could bring all that down to what my week looks like and how I plan my week. And so as I started doing the top program, I was like, and going through the material, I was like, this is a really excellent systematic approach. I really liked I talk about it all the time. I've talked about the podcast. I tell people constantly, I'm like, this is really good stuff. It's a very excellent system that you have. So that's what was going on for me. It was, how do I find the bridge to connect the places that I know I need to be, bringing this bigger vision with how I actually plan what I do on a Tuesday.
That's so interesting because it is, and I've shared this before as well, and you've probably experienced it in events or whatnot you've been to. There's a lot of there's a lot of people out there that are excellent at drawing out what is your goal, what is your passion, and helping to even kind of chunk it down, right? You that phrase, how do you eat the elephant one bite at a time? And they're really good at laying this out. But then where the failure point hits is, yeah, but what about my life? Like what about the reality of I've got school drop up at this time and a soccer game over here and a sick kid over here and I got to go to the vet? Like there's this massive disconnect of I get so passionate and excited about this thing, but then what does that mean I'm doing next week? When
Yeah.
realistically, without it completely disrupting my life? And that's what I am passionate about, helping women with these big dreams and goals get into place is like, no, here's really realistically, pragmatically, how we're going to build this into your calendar along with everything else that you have going on.
Yeah. Well, it's this concept of letting go to grow. We have to do that. And this was interesting. I can remember doing interviews years ago, and I was interviewing for an executive assistant role. And an EA is massively important, to a leader. You need you need a great person helping you. It's a very misunderstood, undervalued position. I'm like, no, no, no.
100%,
They have
yes.
to be able to keep pace with a high paced person. Anyway, she was very interesting, and she had been an EA, speaking of the UN, she'd been an EA to, like, people in the UN and stuff. She was just so fascinating, and this is what she said to me. She was like, so I asked her, because she'd been an EA to men and women, and I was like, "I'm just curious, given what I do, have you noticed any differences?" And she thought about it, and she said, I definitely have experienced that men had a much easier time letting go and delegating than the women did." And I really took that to heart, and I was like, I mean, I definitely saw myself in that,
Yeah.
but there's a caveat, and I think the caveat shows up in why I think your planning system is really strong. It's because often when we look at time management, people are like, "Yes, audit your time, and then go make a list," and it's like, what are the things you want to accomplish? So it's very output focused.
Yes.
But what for many women, the way that we do things, it's much more holistic, and we have to take into account and value and honor the inputs, to create an output, which is a schedule, that you're willing to adhere to. So I think there's like some real nuances around, making space to value, your time. So for instance, since the top program, one of the things that I do is, I much earlier in the process of planning out my week, I put in my personal stuff. So like I
Yeah,
have
that's
a
not with the
goal.
leftovers, right?
No, it's not. Like I'm trying to squat 200 pounds. Okay, barbell back squats, 200 pounds. I'm up to 170. I need 200 pounds. We're gonna get there, Megan. But that takes time and dedication. You know
Yes.
what I mean? It takes a lot of time and dedication. Same with the nutrition to do that.
And you can't
So
go, "Well, I'll just take 6 weeks off and pick back up," because then you're gonna be, starting back over
exactly.
again. Yeah.
So that gets put in very high up in the process, which and then I feel like I can relax because I feel like I have a system I can trust
Mhm.
so that I can let it go.
Mm, so good. What would you say your biggest shift has been with your relationship with your calendar and your time?
The biggest shift for me by far has been cutting what I commit to. So, as I was going through the process, I was noticing, because you have like these weekly check-ins. Hey, did you have to pivot? And invariably, my answer was yes. There were these 4 things or 3 things that I didn't do. How did you respond to that pivot? I just didn't do them. They're on my list. And I realized, creating the space that I need to do the things I need to do is really key. So I think what I saw was how much I can actually do and being much more on it in terms of accurately estimating what I can get done. And the reason that that's important is because now when I don't get something done, I know it's probably because I didn't bring in enough focus or I just kind of screwed off for that
It
hour
happens.
there.
We're
Yeah,
human. Yeah.
right? And so now I will actually make myself do it
Mhm.
because I'm like, no, 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 you had a reasonable amount of time. We're not going to clutter up next week with some really important stuff that you really did commit to. So I think there's this piece in here about integrity, and honoring our word. And it takes a little bit of time to figure out what can I actually honor and what's too much. So I think that's been the biggest thing, just really, cutting back on the things that I'm committing to. And to me, that is important because it allows you as a leader, whether it's in your family, in your community, in your church, in your business, it allows you to be a woman who is in a state of total integrity. Like what you say is what you think is what you do. And that alignment creates so much power, like so much personal power and agency.
Have you felt, because I think for me, a big one of the reasons why I tend to honor what I plan to do is because I have time prioritized in my calendar for myself, for, truly just me, for family, for all of that, that when I see, okay, this is what we're working on this morning, and it's not something I love. I mean, I don't know any business owner that loves every single thing that they do, right? But we do them. I am I'm going to honor it because I can see if I don't and I'd have to squeeze it to later, that's cutting in on my time, on me, right?
Yeah.
And because I have all that time for fulfillment outside of work, it makes my relationship with honoring my plan easier because I'm not piling on 15 things I don't like doing, right? It's just like, "Megan, it's just the one thing. Like, come on." Like,
Yeah.
I have to talk to myself through it sometimes. Like, let's just sit down and
Yeah.
knock it out so that then look at this gorgeous afternoon that you have where you get to relax and do something fun or, whatever it is that we're doing. And I think I hear people say, well, the busier I am, the more crammed I am, the less I procrastinate. And I kind of want to say, but really? I
Yeah.
think that you can avoid procrastinating as well if you have things and time in your life, white space, stuff that you enjoy. I think it allows us to honor and be in integrity with what we said we're going to do a little bit easier as well.
And there's this aspect, to for many of us, and I think some of the folks who are listening may be able to relate to it. There's certainly been so many times in my life where I have come under the habit of valuing myself by what I do, by the output. You know what I mean? By what I'm able to
100%.
produce.
Yes.
And that's basically like workaholism. You know?
Yeah. Your worthiness is
Yeah.
directly equivalent to your output.
Right? And one of the things that I'm really seeing is you can't just replace that. You can't just go from that to knowing to having hobbies, to having, that's a very difficult. You don't just go from a jammed calendar to a joy calendar. It doesn't work like that. There's this
God.
liminal space, where you have to gradually open up space and give yourself time to be bored and give yourself time for sort of this period of discovery that I think for so many women who are conditioned to value ourselves based on what we output, that period, that open space is so key to uncovering who am I and what do I want? And who we are changes. Like who I am today is so different than who I was at 26 years old. There's certain things that are very much in common, but I'm also entering a new phase of life, and to be able to have time to ask myself, who am I now? What do I want? What do I want to create with my time and space? That has just been such a gift, to be intentional about time to create that open space.
And I love that you brought that up. I was just having a conversation with a client today, and she was sharing that, like, her big focus for 2025, she's like, "I think it's gonna take me all year is to rediscover, now that I'm learning how to have white space, what am I gonna do with it?" Because it's been so long since she's had it, right? And it
Yeah.
pains me that, unfortunately, I think this is really a problem we have here in our country, especially for women, that we get, a point in life where suddenly we have free time, and it's been so long that we've lost ourself because our calendar is full of being in service to the roles that we play, and the never-ending task list. And so I love that you brought that up, because I think people do need to realize when they're making this shift, it's not like you're gonna go all of a sudden in 1 week, you're gonna have all this free time, and you're gonna be having fun, and you're gonna be fulfilled and all that. There's gonna be a journey you're gonna need to go through to figure out, what do I want that to look
Yeah,
like? And it's gonna evolve all the time. Mine's always shifting and changing,
totally.
through seasons and ages and stages and all of that. But
And I
now
also
it's
think
fun.
I also think you kind of have to watch out for what you do when you start to get nervous because you have space.
Mhm.
So, as you start to create space, nature abhors a vacuum, right? And so what that space does is it allows women to ask ourselves, what do we really want? Like, what does success look like for me? What are my interests? What are things that maybe I love to do as a little girl that I'm not doing right now, that I've been too busy to do? And all of that is new and scary. It's scary to exist in that space of I don't know, or you're right, or you're stepping from one identity where your time really was. And I really feel for myself as a younger mom to younger kids, I literally did not have time. And sometimes it would be hard listening to older people be like, there's so much more space now. I'd be like, there's not for me, like literally. And
I
that's
haven't
okay. It's a
peed by
phase.
myself in
Yes.
2 years, so don't tell me
Right?
about
Like,
it.
it will pass. This too
Yeah.
shall pass, you know what I mean? And then you'll miss how cute they used to be. But I do think, one of the things that I've noticed is every time you get to a new phase, sometimes you can get drawn back into or to where you used to be. So whether it's filling up your schedule with stuff that really you don't need to be doing anymore or all of that, I've learned to watch myself, or going and making trouble, you know, or
Creating
identify,
problems that didn't really
creating problems
exist.
that didn't need. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, so good. Now, I would love for you to share a little bit, because one of your zones of genius that has been really beneficial to me. And so I want to share this with our listeners, because if you are struggling with this, I want to encourage you to go lean into Eleanor here. I am a very mathematically oriented brain, which is why my top program is a very step by step, systematic approach, very how based, right? Here is how we are going to take all this chaos and build in the harmony. I also think I'm pretty good at prioritization. I teach some systems for that. But you introduced me to a whole other level of it that I didn't know I was missing, which is really on leveling up my prioritization in terms of what
Mm,
what is truly the most important, right? I can go through quick exercises, from a business owner. Is it revenue generating? Does it help with customer support, right? And it's easy to do that. But there's a deeper level to this. And I was introduced to it through one of your podcast episodes where you were talking about that was it your $10,000 hour
yeah.
or task.
Yes.
Would you share a little bit about that? Because I think
Yeah.
it was very mind-blowing to me, and it's made my whole approach to prioritization now is very different.
Yeah. So it's this idea that when you look at the activities that you do in your business, and so I'm going to talk about business owners, but I bet you could, you can kind of extrapolate what we're talking about here to other things that you
Well,
do.
I've applied it
And
to
it's this
even just some of
idea.
my personal goals, like, that have nothing to do
I
with
love that.
business, and it's
Yeah.
very different. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. So it's this idea of the $10,000 hour. So we all have 24 hours in a day, and we may decide I have 4 hours where I'm actually going to be producing something over the course of the day. So how do you decide what needs to happen in those 4 hours if you really want to maximize the amount of money that you're making from the time that you're spending? And so over the years, we've worked with hundreds and hundreds of entrepreneurs, and we actually collect a ton of data points about them. So what they're doing, how, some of the like their habits, just a bunch of data that we've used to start to analyze what are they working on that produces the most economic value that would be very hard to delegate. And so there's certain things we call them the 10K hour super high value task list. And so these are tasks that an entrepreneur can do. And when you do this, you're actually creating massive leverage. The idea is that you your time becomes more valuable as you start to move and impact more people and create maximum value for the maximum amount of people in that hour. So an example would be public speaking. So if you are able to speak like I am right now, where and you have been on my show, where we are using this 30 minutes to not simply speak to each other, but actually through our platforms to be able to speak to thousands or tens of thousands of people, that is an hour that is potentially worth $10,000 or more to a person's company. So that would be one example. Selling to groups of people
Yep.
would be another example where you can sell to one person at a time, but when you sell to groups of people at a time, you are, really creating maximum leverage. Other things can be things like deciding on your competitive moat. So again, super nerdy for entrepreneurs, but competition is exhausting. And a lot of small business owners get stuck in the sea of competing. And it's like you're just competing to get your head above the water a little bit. Nobody wants to do that. What you really want to do is understand, how can I define my market position so I'm in the top 5% of this specific thing? And once I figure out how that is, how can I build a competitive moat so I'm untouchable?
Mm.
Spending your time on that kind of thing. Example, we have one client who she has a very strong niche, and her competitive moat is that she partners with all of the professional associations and nonprofit associations in that niche to become their sort of vendor of choice, which makes her that she gets their seal of approval. So her just spending 15 minutes reaching out to a new partner like that is massively valuable. So these
And
are
you
this
wouldn't think that by just saying
no,
that. Someone would be like, "Oh, delegate that. That's a low value task," right? But you bring in
exactly.
such a different lens to that, because I know sometimes I had fallen in the trap of, I take customer support very seriously. When someone
Yeah.
invests in the program, like, now they're in my
Yeah.
inner circle. But, you are never going to please everybody all the time, right? And being sucked into a potentially negative situation that could take up, over the course of a week, 3 hours of your time to try and change one person's mind who isn't going to have their mind changed. I could have layered that as a top priority item because it falls under the bucket of customer support and satisfaction, which is really important to me. But
Yeah.
if I layer on that lens of, is this impacting the masses? Is
Yeah.
this really providing what I really want with a customer experience, which is the community support, all of that? And the answer is no, right?
Yeah.
Maybe that is not best handled by me. And so
Yes.
I just want to thank you for really putting that kind of additional layer of very thoughtfulness and intentionality.
Mhm.
And, saying how it even applies to personal stuff. I've shared with a lot of my listeners, I embarked on trying to learn how to play the cello a couple years ago. That's my latest hobby. And I practice, but I mean, I don't like scales. I don't like scales when I played piano. I don't like the scales when I'm doing the cello. So it's one of those things where it's like, I'll do that for, like, okay, here's my 10-second scale and I'm going to practice. But I put that lens on it and realized 10 minutes on that scale actually provides far more value with the pace at which my playing is improving than the piece that I was working on. And so,
Mm,
I don't know, you've made me look at pretty much everything I'm spending my time on very
yeah.
differently by layering that in. So I wanna thank you for that.
Well, it's like, how do I unlock mastery? Because the interesting thing about the
Mm.
difference between an amateur and a master is that an amateur looks like they're rushing. They look frantic, and a master
Did you
is
watch me
never in a
practicing
hurry.
my
Yeah, I
scales a
right?
year ago?
But, so I live in Nova Scotia, Canada, where we have Natalie McMaster, who's one of the world's best fiddlers, and she
Yes.
says if she goes a day without playing her scales, she feels it in her fingers. So it's you know what I mean? It's identifying what are those inputs that create the biggest outputs, and they're not always obvious, and I think taking the time to understand and pinpoint what they are really allows us to figure out what do we put in our precious time that we've set aside,
Mm.
what goes in there. And I think being so strategic about what goes in there is, it unlocks next level performance for women.
100%. I heard you say something, I think, is that maybe passing on a reel or something or a podcast episode that I really landed with me, and I see it with a lot of the women that I work with as well, which is that people often underestimate how much they can get done in a year, but overestimate how much they can get done, and I think you said a month in that example, and I hadn't ever heard it phrased that way, but I think you 100% nailed it, and this is why understanding that longer how to do longer term strategic planning, that year-long planning, while also knowing how to do the more tactical weekly, monthly planning, you've gotta have all of those pieces together, or you will likely be in that position where you have totally underestimated what you could have gotten done in the year, and you're looking back, wishing you'd made other choices, or you're stuck in that place of constantly being overbooked and overscheduled and carrying tasks over week to week. And so I just think the way you phrased that
Mm.
is exactly why mastering all these levels of planning is so
Yeah.
incredibly important.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's this idea too that the key to excellence, it's a process. It's always a process. And it's like with anything, mastery of anything, we will talk with our clients about how do you scale a business. Well, with anything, usually you're doing it one initiative at a time. And you install an initiative, you get consistent with it, then you worry about the quality, and then you make it bigger. And that takes time, and a lot of times what happens is people, they just want to install something and have it be awesome immediately, and I'm like,
Well, that sounds
this is
great.
not
I'd
amateur
rather do
hour."
that.
I know, like, this is not amateur hour. Come on now. Come on, get serious. That's where
Yeah.
my, like, inner fierceness comes out.
Mm. Well, anybody listening that is an entrepreneur and is an entrepreneur that has a desire to be one of your hopefully new statistics about women business owners and the success that they can have, where is the best place for people to connect with you?
Yeah. The best place is I'm gonna give 2 best places. So place number 1 is my podcast. It's called Woman
It's
Owned. Fantastic
phenomenal.
episode, right? But it's fantastic episode with Megan. So it's Woman Owned, the growth podcast for women entrepreneurs. So go check that out. And I am very active on Instagram. So come and say hi. Let me know that you connected with me on Megan's show at Eleanor Beaton.
And we'll have both of those links in the show note. I do not miss a week of your podcast. I learn from it every single week. So truly I cannot it is an honor to have you here just sharing your expertise, but it also I feel like it puts a little feather in my cap to be able to have someone at your caliber in terms of you already have such a great relationship with your calendar and time to openly come here and share that yeah, you you leveled
It's a
up and learned
great
some
program,
stuff
man.
in the
It's a
program, and
great
that means a lot.
yeah.
So,
It really
thank
is
you.
excellent. I think everybody should take it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think so, but thank you
Right?
for saying that, and
No problem.
please, everyone, come join me in stalking Eleanor on Instagram. I always do. You will learn, you will laugh. It's fantastic, but thank you again for being here today and sharing your time. It means so much.